welcome to Everyday Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story. But before that, we are going to be reading the Bible. I do not know where that is.
I have it over here.
Oh, yeah, it's over there. But then we are going to be doing the synopsis. But first up, we're going to be doing, before the Bible, we are going to be doing the joke of the day. And Daniel doesn't really want to do it today, so I'm going to be doing it.
What do they need to do? No, not today.
And then
I said not today.
we are looking forward to a special activity. We might do it next video, so make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss another video. And I will do the joke of the day. I actually have 2 jokes for you. I just gotta find the second one again. There it is. So the first joke is hi Jessica. So the first joke is kind of scary, kind of funny. And tell me how funny you think the joke is in the comments. I had a terrible night. I dreamt I ate a filthy pound marshmallow.
Well, that's not so bad.
Well, that's not... Well, so what's so terrible about that? When I woke up, my pillow was gone.
So you ate the pillow?
Yeah, he ate the pillow. So, please tell me how you like the joke in the comments. And we have 3 people on already.
Wow.
And the next joke, my dad actually picked out. What did the policeman say to the shirt? You're under a vest. Smile, sorry.
Jennifer says hi.
Daniel says
Hi.
Okay, Dad's turn.
No.
Dead
man. All right.
Dork man.
Sorry.
Dork man.
All right. So we finished Psalm 27 yesterday. And so we're going to start with Psalm 28. We're not going to skip one like I tried to yesterday. We are going to begin with Psalm 28, and here we go. Of David. To you, O Lord, I call my rock. Be not deaf to me, lest if you be silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit. Hear the voice of my pleas for mercy when I cry to you for help. When I lift up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary, do not drag me off with the wicked, with the workers of evil who speak peace with their neighbors while evil is in their hearts. Give to them according to their work and according to the evil of their deeds. Give to them according to the work of their hands. Render them their due reward, because they do not regret the works of the Lord or the work of his hands. They do not regard, because they do not regard the works of the Lord or the work of his hands. He will tear them down and build them up no more. Blessed be the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exults, and with my song I give thanks to him. The Lord is the strength of his people. He is the saving refuge of his anointed. O save your people and bless your heritage. Be their shepherd and carry them forevermore. It just says forever, not forevermore. Psalm 29, a psalm of David. Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord over many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon to skip like a calf, and Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord makes the deer give birth and strips the forests bare. And in his temple all cry glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as king forever. May the Lord give strength to his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace. I'm going to read one more. This one is Psalm 30, a psalm of David, a song at the dedication of the temple. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up, and have not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. O Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol. You restored me to life from among those who go down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O you his saints, and give thanks to his holy name, for his anger is but for a moment, and his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. But your favor, O Lord, you made my mountain stand strong. You hid your face, I was dismayed. To you, O Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I plead for mercy. What profit is there in my death? If I go down to the pit, will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper. You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. That's the end of Psalm 30. And tomorrow we will begin with Psalm 31. And at this time, I present to you, you.
The one that only Kimberly
Top
sneezes.
6.
What he said.
Okay. So what happened in the last chapter, Iori, he went over to
Iori?
Iori? Onesimus. Sorry. Too
She's trying to tell you my story. That one will be later.
I'm like, okay, ancient names from Bible times. Iori, Onesimus,
All right, get on. Go
Ben
on.
Hur. Sorry. Onesimus, he. So, what happened was, he and his master, and his master's son, they were going over to Ephesus, and yeah, Ephesus, Daniel.
Yeah, they went to Ephesus.
Not emphasis, Ephesus. I said Ephesus.
Okay, sorry.
It's hard to speak with these things on. Sorry. So what happened was, they were watching. Hi, Mom. They were watching the gladiator things, and while they were doing that, Iori's master, he was going over to see Paul, because he's like, oh, I want to see what this Paul guy is all about. And so he goes over, and then after the first few days, he's like, I'm gonna go tonight. So he takes Onesimus and takes. Sorry, I can't speak very well. It's hard for me. These
comments from the peanut gallery, okay?
these aligners are really hard to speak with. So he takes him over to visit Paul, like, that first night, and he, like, talks with Paul all night, and Iori, he really didn't like hearing about God and etc. Even, like, during the day, he sat in a corner with his hands over his ears, because he just didn't want to hear it. So he goes over and somebody offers him some food, and he sleeps after eating. And like in the morning, his master comes back, and he now believes in Jesus and God and everything. So what happens is he goes over to visit Paul every day, and so one time while he's visiting Paul, they take a bunch of idols and they burn them. So they're burning all the idols, and then the silversmiths the next day, they're like, you know, these people, they're taking our images of the gods and they're burning them and melting them and all these magic scrolls that are worth a ton, and they're just destroying them. You know, if they don't like the gods, then is our temple in danger? So they start rioting. And I actually have my Bible here, and I'm going to read the passage in Acts 19 where they riot. So my Bible, it's like got these little sub-chapter things. And I'm starting right here at verse 21, a riot at Ephesus. Now after these events, Paul resolved in the Spirit to pass through Macedonia and Archaea, and go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I must also see Rome. And having sent into Mongolia 2 of his helpers, Timothy and Aretas, and he himself, stayed in Asia for a while. About that time, there arose no little disturbance concerning the way. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, brought no little business to the craftsmen. These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades, and said, men, you know that from this business we have made our wealth. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying that gods made with hands are not gods. And there is danger not only that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, and that she may even be disposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship. When they heard this, they were enraged and were crying out, great is Artemis of the Ephesians! So the city was filled with the confusion and the rushing together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius, and Aristarchus. Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. But when Paul wished to go in among the crowd, the disciples would not let him, and even some of the Asiarchs who were friends of his sent him and were urging him not to venture into the theater. Now some cried out one thing, some another, for the assembly was in confusion, and most of them did not know why they had come together. Some of the crowd prompted Alexander, whom the Jews had put forward, and Alexander, motioning with his hand, wanted to make a defense to the crowd. But when they recognized that he was a Jew, for about 2 hours they all cried out with one voice, "Great is Artemis, of the Ephesians." And when the town clerk had quieted the crowd, he said, "Men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know the city of the Ephesians is city of the Ephesians is temple keeper of the great Artemis, and the sacred stone that fell from the sky, probably a meteor. Seeing then that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious or blasphemous to our goddess. If therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, the courts are open, and there are
Sorry, I lost my place. Proconsuls.
proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly, for we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today, since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion." And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. So that is what happened, and there are a few things that I need to clear up that happened during the riot. So,
In the story.
yeah, in the story.
This isn't necessarily real,
Yeah, this
but what we just read was real because it's in the Bible.
right. So in the story, this is what happened. Onesimus, he went over and he was being dragged through the crowd, and he saw Artemis, right? It was Artemis. Archippus.
Artemis is the goddess.
Archippus.
What's his name? Archippus.
Yeah, Archippus. That's his name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Artemis and Archippus. That's actually really weird.
Archippus?
Hmm.
I can't. How have I been pronouncing it?
Archippus.
Anyway, yeah, I think it's Archippus is how I've been saying it.
So, Archippus, he's probably dead. I mean, the story said that he looked dead, so I'm gonna go with that. I think he's dead. And so, what happened was Onesimus, he was like really mad at Archippus because of all the things that he'd done, all of the bad things, him being beaten with rods and all the other things. He was like, I could whisper, "Hey, that man's father burned the scrolls and melted the idols." And as soon as he said it, he regretted it because the entire mob, that heard it, just started beating him up. And he's probably dead. A few people dragged him away when he said something like, "God help me," or "Jesus help me."
Who was it?
It was Paul's friends who dragged him away.
Do you still have this marked?
No, oops.
Interesting. I noticed it when you read it today. The names of Paul's friends, as you say, are... Where is it? Oh, it's in here. Gaius. And... where's the other one? Anyway, it's the two dudes that are named right here in the passage that you just read.
Yeah. So I think that's about it. That's all that happened. He got pushed further through the riot, though.
Aristarchus.
Yeah, Aristarchus, that's the other guy.
Gaius and Aristarchus.
So that's about all that happened.
Super duper. Alrighty. Alrighty. That was JJ. Hi. How's everybody doing? Happy Valentine's Day. And
Happy Valentine's Day.
I'm missing about half of my fans here. And so I'm just going to wait for them to return. And here comes one of them with something round.
An eraser!
An eraser, yes. Okay. So, that's what happened yesterday. The riot was a pretty big emotional scene. And of course, Onesimus said some things that caused the riotous crowd to trample and or kill Archippus. Archippus. I think that's what I've been saying. Archippus. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just get started. I think that Mom is taking care of the dogs right now. So sometimes that happens. All right, so this is chapter 9. And here we go. It had never entered his head that Archippus could die. A couple of black eyes and a few teeth knocked out was about all he had imagined, and he would have enjoyed that. A country boy straight from the mountains, he had no knowledge of mob madness. But it was no good regretting now. Archippus was dead, trampled under the feet of the crowd, and the night had fallen and the shouting had ceased. He was standing under the stars outside the theater, which he had left because everyone else had left. The town clerk had ordered all festivities to stop and the streets to be cleared for fear of further riots. So he was quite alone, and there was nowhere to stay and nowhere to go. He could not go back to his master, and anyhow, where was he? Mourning beside the body of his son, or searching the streets for him? Onesimus looked all around him, as though searching for some refuge, to the mountains on his left, with the fierce stars burning above them, to the moonlit marshes on the right, to the sleeping white city below him, and the silver sea beyond. If he could run to the harbor and slip over the side beneath the waves, perhaps he could find rest and oblivion. But into whose arms would he be committing himself? Neither Diana, nor Christ, nor any of the other deities had stretched out a hand to save Archippus. Perhaps there was no one, nothing, and to fall into darkness and nothingness alone with his sin was a terrible thought. It was better even to face life than to face death or some angry, unknown god. Nothing, no one. Unconsciously, his feet had been carrying him past the theater and down the hill toward Philemon's house. Now he was standing at the end of their street, and he suddenly longed for his master, who had been, in spite of it all, a good master. Then it occurred to him that his master need never know. He could still go back and pretend to be horrified at the news. No one need ever know. Everything could go on as before, except for the torment of his own guilty conscience. He quickened his steps and reached the house and knocked. But the door was locked and the house was empty. Nothing. No one. He must find some kind human being, someone he could touch and see and hear. He longed for his mother, but his mother was far, far away at the foot of the gorges where the flocks grazed. It seemed like another world. Then he remembered the weaver's wife with her smile and her gentle hands. He would go there and ask if there was any news of his master. He ran all the way down the harbor street and up the side alley, and there was a glimmer of light shining from the weaving shed. It too was locked, and at first no one answered his timid knock, although he could hear someone moving about inside. He knocked again, and after a little while a frightened voice said, "Who is there?" "I, the slave who supped with you the other night. Oh, Mistress Priscilla, let me in." The door was opened cautiously. He slipped inside, and Priscilla slammed it shut. She was very pale, and she looked as if she had been weeping. But when she saw the gray-strained face of the boy and the fear in his eyes, she forgot her own troubles. "Why, child, what is the matter?" she asked. "Did you get caught in the riots too?" He stared at her in silence. His heart was breaking, and he longed to tell her all about it and cry his heart out against her. But he must never, never tell anyone. He suddenly realized that all his life he would have to carry this secret alone, a great barrier between him and every other human being. So he simply answered, "Yes, I was in the riots. I am looking for my master. Have you seen him?" Priscilla shook her head and drew Onesimus into the inner room where she was busy packing the provisions. She was glad to have someone to talk to, and she could see that the boy needed to rest. She laid him on a couch and brought him bread and wine, chatting away all the time. "I have not seen your master. I expect he is with the other disciples up at the school of Tyrannus, and I only hope they will have the sense to stop talking before it is too late. Paul would go and say farewell to them all. Crazy, I call it, but you cannot stop him. It was all we could do to prevent him from going to the theater and putting himself right into their hands. He, our father in Christ. Gaius and Aristarchus were caught and barely escaped with their lives. They are covered with bruises from head to foot, but they are strong as bulls, and it won't hurt them. But they must leave the town with Paul and be out and away on the coast road from Macedonia before dawn. They could never get past the temple alive after daylight. They will look in here to collect food for the journey soon after midnight," they said. "Stay here, if you like, child, and rest. You look as though you need it." He was grateful to obey. If his master was really up at the school, there was no point following him, and if he was not, Onesimus had no idea where else to look for him. Besides, he felt too tired ever to move again. The wine had been strong and sweet, and merciful sleep was stealing over him. Just for a little while he could forget. He closed his eyes, and she covered him with a blanket, prayed that the Lord would give him light, and went back to her baking. He woke up suddenly some hours later. It was still dark, although the first cock was crowing, and the room was full of whispering men who seemed in a hurry, but his master was not amongst them. Peering over his blanket, Onesimus watched their tense faces in the lamplight as they made their last hasty preparations for flight. Gaius was there with his head in bandages, and Aristarchus' face was twice its normal size, but they seemed strong and impatient to be on their way. Staves in hand, faces hidden in rough hoods, they were all setting out together to escort Paul through the dangerous temple suburbs and on to the coast road. "Is Philemon the Colossian with you, or not with you?" asked Priscilla. "His slave came searching for him. He is over there, asleep." "He did not come," said Paul, his voice very sad. "How deeply I long to say farewell, for he is my dearly beloved son in the faith. What can have happened, I wonder, to keep him from us tonight?" Of all the company, Paul alone seemed in no hurry. He crossed over to where Onesimus lay and stood looking down on him, his scarred face very tender. "Tell him I sought for him and longed for him," he said. "Tell him I commend him to God and to the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Tell him I pray continually that he may be strengthened with might by God's Spirit in the inner man. Bid him to carry the gospel of Christ to his valley where my feet have never trod, and you, my son." He was soaring away in spirit, forgetful of time or place, all his thoughts with his newborn child in the faith who had not come. The waiting company fidgeted nervously, for the darkness was thinning, and Gaius and Aristarchus were particularly conspicuous. Priscilla laid her hand on his arm. "Our Father in Christ," she said firmly, "the cocks are crowing all over the town." He came back to them at once and smiled at this staunch, faithful woman, who for over 2 years had stood by him through thick and thin, and served him and fed him and cared for him as he battled with his persecutors, travailed over his converts, and worked day and night to train the evangelists who were to carry the news all over Western Asia. She had baked all night and loaded them now with at least 3 days' provisions. He turned to bless little Levi where he lay asleep, but he somehow felt himself being propelled through the door by Mistress Priscilla. Already the grey light was stealing down the street, and there was not a moment to lose. He turned to bless her for the last time, but she had gone inside and shut the door, fearful of further delay, sitting at the loom where Paul had worked for his living, although they would so gladly have supported him. Priscilla buried her face in her hands and wept. "O Father," she prayed, "take them unharmed on their journey. Keep thy church in this town, and bring my dear Aquila safely home." Onesimus watched her for a time, and then went over to her. "I must go and find my master," he said. "It will be light now, and I think he will have come home." She wiped away her tears and led him out into the street, telling him not to forget the apostle's parting message to his master. He turned the corner and glanced seaward, but there was no glory of sunrise today. The morning was stealing in, wrapped in a grey mist, and he suddenly remembered how his master had wrapped the cloak around him and drawn him to his side on that last chilly dawn. He began to run up the harbour street, longing and yet dreading to get back to him, expecting to hear the sound of wailing and mourning coming from the windows. But the door was still locked, and the house was empty. Where was Philemon? Was he dead too? And where was Hermes? Were they all dead? In a sudden panic he crashed at the neighbor's door with such force that the whole family came running to the door, rubbing the sleep from their eyes and gaping. "My master!" cried Onesimus, before they had a chance to tell him what they thought of him. "Do you know where he is? I can't find him." "Well, no need to break down our door if you can't," growled the owner of the house. "Your master will keep. However, as a matter of fact, I do know where he is, and he left a message for you. His son was injured in the riots and taken to a hospital up above the agora, and he is up there with him. He said you were to go and wait on him." Onesimus' relief was so great that he nearly fainted. A hospital was for the living, not for the dead. Could it be? He dared not even think of it, lest he be disappointed, yet hope seemed to wing his young feet as he sped across the marketplace, and up the hill to the south of the city, and even as he ran, the sun rose over the crest to meet him, bathing the marble pillars, temples, and city buildings in a rosy light. Life! Life! The relief was so great that he forgot the possibility of pain or weakness or of deformity worse than death. He found the hospital without any difficulty and almost pushed aside the porter who wanted to know his business. His business was with his master, and a moment later he bounded into the quiet hall where several who had been crushed or injured in the riots lay on couches. A woman sat weeping beside the tiny child, and an old man lay very quiet, as though asleep. Onesimus checked himself, and his joy drained away as he caught sight of Philemon and Hermes sitting motionless beside a still figure on a couch in the corner. So very, very still. His head was tied up in blood-stained bandages, and his face, apart from the deep blue bruises, was white as death. They all seemed to be sitting there waiting for death, yet outside the sun had risen and the darkness had passed. Onesimus crouched at his master's feet and looked up yearningly into his face. Philemon leaned forward. "Go to the weaver's house," he said, "and entreat the apostle to come. Tell him my son is grievously wounded." But the apostle is gone, interrupted Onesimus. He went before daybreak on the road to Macedonia. I saw him go. Philemon sprang up. Gone? He repeated. And I never saw him or bade him farewell. Oh, why should this have happened? He could have healed Archippus. They say there was healing in the very garments and handkerchiefs that he touched, and even devils were cast out. And to think I missed him! But the Christ he told us about is still here. Archippus opened his eyes at the sound of their voices and spoke feebly but distinctly. He will not leave us. As I fell, I knew. I cried out, and he came to me. If I die, I shall see him again, and I saw him then. He spoke with difficulty, for he had been drugged with wine. There wasn't a quotation mark there, an in quotation. He spoke with difficulty, for he had been drugged with wine and myrrh to ease his pain, and everything seemed far away except the presence that had come to him as he struggled under the feet of the crowd and had lifted him up. The arms of Aristarchus and the arms of Christ, perhaps they were one and the same, for was he not alive in his people and working through their dedicated members? But Archippus only understood that a long time afterwards. On that day he knew that Christ himself had heard his cry and had stooped down and lifted him from the gates of death. His father leaned forward and spoke to him in a low voice, and he closed his eyes and seemed to drop into unconsciousness. But he was restless, and after a time he spoke again. Father, Onesimus, I must tell you, I cannot die unforgiven. I stole the chain from Master Plautus that day in Colossae, and I let Onesimus be beaten with rods for my sin. There was a long moment of shocked silence. Then Philemon spoke slowly but firmly. As Christ died and suffered for your sin, it is forgiven, my son. He bore it. He made peace by the blood of his cross. Yes, whispered Archippus, I know, but I want you to forgive me too. I do forgive you, my son, said his father, but Onesimus, remembering the rods, was silent. Chapter 10. The wounds on Archippus' head soon healed up, for he was young and strong, but his leg had been twisted and trampled on, and was badly broken. He suffered agonies at the hands of the surgeon and the bone setters, and it was some weeks before he could move from his bed, except to be carried to the house, and then it was clear to all that he would never walk again without limping, for one of his legs was shortened and deformed. Hermes was sent to Colossae to carry the news to Ephesus, and Onesimus waited on his young master day and night. Archippus did not change in a day. His suffering and helplessness and the increasing heat often made him exceedingly irritable and bad-tempered, yet there was a difference. He seemed to recognize that Onesimus was a person with a soul of his own, and a right of his own to live, instead of being Archippus' property, born with no other purpose than to serve him. Onesimus was often amazed and embarrassed at his young master's humility and gentleness, and even gratitude, and at the penitence when his suffering made him difficult and impatient. He hardly knew how to deal with this relationship, and was thankful to get away and run along the hillside to the southern beaches, and there fling himself to the sparkling Aegean. He would swim far out, enjoying the cool water and his own fine strength, forgetting the troubling thoughts that so often assailed him. You are young and strong, the lazy blue water seemed to tell him, and this life is fair, and death and judgment are far away. Enjoy what you have here and now, for the narrow way that leads to eternal life is not for you. Archippus paid the price, but it is a price you could never pay. So eat and drink and be merry, and love the sun and the sea, and worship the beauty of the earth. And for Archippus and Philemon the hours were not dull, for the little church at Ephesus rallied round them. Priscilla became the boy's faithful nurse, cooking appetizing dishes and dressing his wounds, and from morning till night there were small groups of Christians gathered at his bedside. Through the long, hot summer hours, they told him the story of Christ, of the old Jewish prophecies, of his lowly birth, his spotless life, his atoning death, and his glorious resurrection, of the coming of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, and of the gospel they had been chosen to proclaim. Philemon had lost all interest in the guilds now. His farm was prospering in any case, and his aim in life was to carry the gospel to his valley and to help build up the church of Christ in Colossae, in Laodicea, and in Hierapolis, and perhaps even to join Epaphras on his travels northward to Sardis, to Pergamus, and to other great cities of Asia. His heart was aglow with the springtime of his early life, his early love, and there was so much to learn if he was to lead others. Often they would sit talking far into the night, until the sky and the stars seemed no barrier to the heavenly places where they roamed in spirit. Visitors from other districts and lands often dropped in, for most ships stopped at Ephesus, where 3 great roads converged, and many were the stories told round Archippus' couch. Unless the story was thrilling enough to keep him awake, Onesimus, however, usually fell asleep during these discourses, for he had no interest in the spread of the gospel. Besides, his mind was beginning to be full of other schemes for his own future. Hermes had not yet returned, for he was directing the haymaking at the farm, and Philemon, with his older slave away and his son crippled, was giving Onesimus more and more responsibility. He went daily to the market on small errands, and he felt that Philemon, with his head in the clouds, dreaming of Christ's glory, was not likely to check carefully on the price of a melon or a joint of meat. The coins he was hiding away were very small indeed, but they were mounting up, and he was still young. One day his time would come. He must be patient, always patient, and very, very careful. It was high summer when Archippus was at last ready to be carried home to Colossae, and the traveling would be arduous because of the heat. They hired a flat cart with an awning drawn by oxen, and the crippled boy lay on a bed. He looked white and wasted and was longing for his mother and the higher, cooler air of the Colossian plateau, but they were all sorry to leave their friends in Ephesus. Many accompanied them on their way when they set off in the dark over the wall of Mount Prion and turned to take a long look at the beautiful white sleeping city before dropping down into a sandy valley where the warm air was scented with pines and junipers. At length the path led up to the fertile river pastures where the gray light was beginning to steal down, and on they went, loth to part. Aquila with little Levi riding joyfully on the oxen, Onesiphorus, Epenetus, and all the others whose brothers they had become and whom they had learned to love with that deep new love of the Spirit within them. Then the sun appeared over the mountains that walled in the valley ahead, lifting the heads of the sunflowers and poppies and kissing the young green corn into gold. They stopped under a group of poplar trees that screened them from the road and sang a hymn that Paul had taught them, with tears of mingled joy and fear streaming down their faces. If we died with him, we shall also live with him. If we suffer, we shall also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. Death and suffering, they were round them on all sides like thunderclouds about to break. But in the flush of his young, untried courage, Philemon felt no fear of either. He was going home to his wife and to his great new adventure, to win the valley for Christ. They parted with prayers and blessing and went on their way rejoicing. But it was a difficult journey. The air under the awning was stifling in the daytime, and Archippus, tormented by flies and the jolting of the wagon, became as irritable and imperious as he had ever been in his life, and Onesimus, forced to wait on him, did so with a sullen, stony resentment that was worse than outright cruelty. And yet Onesimus was not unhappy. if Archippus was so unpleasant and unjust that he had little sympathy with his sufferings, and he was glad to be home. Lately he had tired of the noisy city streets and the buzz of the harbor, and he longed for the silence of the mountains and for the pools and streams and rocks of the canyons, the dancing poppies, the green corn sighing and bowing in the wind, the hundreds of small brave flowers along the wayside, the glorious dawns and sunsets of the wide spaces of stars over the mountain crests, captivated him with their beauty. He loved traveling. The world was very wide, and men even spoke of lands beyond the Roman Empire. When he was free, he would travel to the utmost bounds and beyond. They reached their own familiar valley late on the 4th day. The air was beginning to cool, and they hoped to arrive home before dark. These long June evenings were the best time to travel, and Archippus had just waked from sleep and was lying quietly on his side, watching the landscape bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. His father had walked ahead, and Onesimus lay prone, his chin cupped in his hands. They were about to pass under the fortifications of Laodicea, and he was gazing up at them, dreaming. In which house did she live? And what was she doing just now? Had she grown and changed, or was she still the same simple, kindly, merry little maiden? He had often thought of her at Ephesus. In fact, she was always there in the back of his mind. But now he suddenly began to realize all she had meant to him and made him. It was because of her innocence and purity that he had known instantly that the temple worship of Artemis was vile and ugly. It was because of her young, slender body held so proudly that he had known that life and youth were glorious as he swam in the sea. It was her innate beauty that had opened his eyes to all beauty and made the flowers along the way and the colors of the sky things of joy and worship. He longed for her now with a new distinct longing, and a resolve was suddenly born in him to see her again as soon as might be. "I'm sorry, Onesimus. I'm sorry." Archippus' voice, humble and pleading, broke in upon his thoughts. He did not wish to think about Archippus and his problems just then, but he supposed he had better listen, so he called back over his shoulder, assuring him that all was well. "But it's not all well," said Archippus. He was tired out with the journey and disappointment at his own bad behavior, weary with trying to be brave. "Oh, Onesimus, I wish you were a Christian, and then you would understand and pray for me instead of hating me when I'm hard and unkind. Christ taught us to suffer patiently, but I fail all the time." Onesimus rolled over and gaped at him. He could not begin to understand this new Archippus. "I don't hate you," he said awkwardly. "I'm sorry for you. Probably we feel the same sometimes. You are held by your injury, and I am held by my slavery. But one day maybe your Christ or your Paul will heal you. They say he did many miracles, and one day maybe I shall buy my freedom, so there is hope for us both." "Do you hate being a slave so much then?" asked Archippus softly. He had never thought about it before. "I think it would not matter so much if you were a Christian. Aquila used to say that in Christ there was neither bond nor free. He taught us to bear Christ's yoke with meekness and to be content with our lot, as Paul is content with prison and stripes and hunger and thirst and danger. But oh, Onesimus, may God forgive me and Christ have mercy upon me. I am not content with my lot." "Neither am I," said Onesimus. He had no intention of bearing his yoke with meekness or of being content with his lot. He fingered the little lump on the inside of the girdle where he had hoarded his coins and smiled to himself. One day he would change his lot. No pun there. Change his lot with the loose change that he had in his purse. I'm sure that Patricia St. John wasn't intending a pun there. So that's the end of chapter 10. We are going to learn from yesterday and not continue on with chapter 11. Although it's very tempting to just keep going.
I know.
This is a great story. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are, as much as JJ is. Do you like the story
I
so
love
far?
the story.
What's your favorite part so far?
I think my favorite part was the part where he ran straight into that door.
He ran straight into a door.
Remember?
I'm trying to remember that.
I don't remember.
To knock on the door?
When he
And-
ran to the house and he knocked on the door?
Like, bang, 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 bang.
Okay. What's your favorite part so far, Daniel?
I don't know.
My favorite part's later.
Okay, but what's your favorite part that we've read so far? My favorite part's later too, but I'm not going to give it away.
The pools.
The pools?
Yeah, the green pools.
Is that when he
Mountains.
met Irene?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool part where he met Irene, and yeah.
Good.
Did you like that part where he met Irene?
Yeah.
In the what's it?
The green
The
pools in the canyon.
in the canyon.
But that's where we are going to be ending it today.
So I hope you're enjoying the story as much as we are, and we will let you go now.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. What do they need to do?
Hit the like button, subscribe.
If
and
you're
hit
on
the
Facebook,
bell.
hit the heart button because it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to know.
Did you get to switch DOMs?
Dorms. I said dorms.
Oh, it isn't. There is an R there. How is school
Dorm.
going? Did you get to switch dorms?
What's a dorm?
School is good. I'm working on homework right now.
Yeah,
and now we've got a plethora of hearts, and that makes me feel
Oh, cuddles.
like Valentine's Day. Yeah, some cuddles too, huh?
Yay.
All right.
No.
All right. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
All right. Good night.
Good night.